There comes a point in every good anime lover's life where he or she sits down and thinks to themselves, man, a hell of a lot of anime is based on manga, and a lot of those adaptations hardly ever cover all the material. I should start reading manga. But the issue you face then is quite where to start. Plump for the wrong choice and you might swear off manga for good, thinking that manga just isn't your kind of thing. What you need to kickstart a manga reading hobby is a solid series that keeps you hooked to the page, coming back to the bookstore for more volumes every time you finish the last. But not for so long that you grow tired of it. Something reasonably long and complete is your best bet, but it has to be a whopper too. A series so engrossing that it'll have you broadening your horizons in the search for more. This is where a silent voice comes in. Will it have you opening up to more, or by the end will you be hearing none of it? Shoya Ishida is a young boy waging a daily war against boredom, and when Shoko Nishimiya, a girl who can't hear, transfers into his class, he finds his new favourite target. The torture Shoko endures escalates until she is forced to change schools once more, and Shoya finds himself subsequently blamed and isolated by his peers. Years later, he seeks out Shoko to make up for the childhood he took part in destroying, but is it already too late? A Silent Voice is a manga that aims to tackle a large variety of heavy and complex themes from the outset. It acquaints its readers with themes of disability, social anxiety, systemic oppression, communication, depression and understanding, all deeply explored and handled with a distinct mastery. Shoko's disability is explored especially well, not just as a hindrance to Shoko herself but also to those around her. I'll dive a bit deeper into that one later. A Silent Voice also manages to capture the thought process of a socially anxious person completely, and translate those thoughts into a series of consequent actions that are almost scarily true to life. This manga juggles a whole bunch of interconnected themes, pulling them off smoothly yet with surgical levels of accuracy at the same time. Although A Silent Voice does have a few issues with the timing of its content. In this coming of age redemption story about understanding and communicating with other people, we get a plot thread from out of nowhere about making a movie. Although it does make a conscious effort to entangle itself with the primary plot, it still feels out of place. Any other teamwork oriented activity could have served the same purpose. The story could have done perfectly well without that subplot. The last several chapters could also have been cut as they do meander, lingering on a self-contained conflict that doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. Although the final few pages still leave you on a poignant note, the several chapter long build up leaves it feeling a little flaccid. There's also a sequence of chapters somewhere before this where we get a wave of sudden character development on the secondary cast's behalf. It comes across as really disjointed and mechanical compared to the manga's typically silky flow. I see a lot of drama manga do this when it's gearing up to the end, and every time it happens it comes off as clunky and almost lazy. But putting those little complaints aside, A Silent Voice is still a wonderfully well written manga. It is packed with hidden meaning to a lot of its dialogue that you could find yourself missing entirely. It left me with several nice surprises on my second read through. It has a rhythm that is easy to get sucked into, keeping you engrossed in its pages if you so much as try to skim through. There's always something to draw and hold your attention in these books. Although a romantic angle of the story is left somewhat unresolved, enough snippets and suggestions are thrown your way throughout that you know where that thread is headed anyway. Leaving it up to the audience to fill in this particular blank means that the manga's finale can focus in on its central themes without distraction. A Silent Voice's story is steady, fluid, and above all, emotionally gripping. The first character we really get a handle on is Shoya Ishida in his childhood, who fancies himself a daredevil and will try anything to overcome boredom. When Shoko moves into his class, he sees finding out what makes her tick as the ultimate weapon against boredom. Although he's a nasty kid, we still stick by him because we see that he has a lot to learn about himself, other people, and the way the world works. We also understand exactly why he bullies people, and why Shoko is his favourite target even if we still don't approve of him. When he goes too far, we don't end up hating him for it. Instead, we want to urge him to redeem himself, which he does eventually try to do. He could have easily been a dislikable character, but the manga balances his childhood character delicately enough that we still stand with him, though we understand that he's the one in the wrong. On his path to redemption, Shoya learns to use sign language, but this part of his life is skimmed over. I can understand wanting to cut straight ahead to when he decides to face Shoko Shoko once more, but I still don't think it would have been a waste of our time. It would have shown him struggling to communicate with Shoko in much the same way Shoko struggles to communicate with everyone else. It could have been an integral part of Shoya's arc, but there's no use complaining about it. I can see how it helps the pacing not to linger on some specific story beats. The story more than makes up for it by forcing Shoya into several brief situations where other people can't understand what he's saying, or he can't hear anyone else, or he can't speak properly. Situations where he does step into Shoko's shoes for a short while. Shoya's character is explored to its fullest extent, and we never stop cheering him on, hoping that one day he'll open himself up to other people, having found the redemption he was looking for. Shoko is this manga's great triumph, the girl who can't hear. She comes off as a bit mysterious at first, though we still feel for her because of what she goes through. Through Shoko, the manga portrays with the utmost respect the plight of the deaf, while also crafting the character of a kind young woman who keeps to herself, but ends up bearing the emotional weight that life heaps upon her as a result. There's something solemn about her smile, leaving us constantly guessing about what's going on behind it. She's a stubborn girl, refusing to hate other people though she has every right to. It's a lack of communication and ultimately understanding which breeds frustration and hatred in those around her. She isn't a Mary Sue character either. She has these personal flaws that are deeply woven into her personality, and has a lot more in common with Shoya than a first glance would find. I think it's the fact that she is a flawed individual that makes her such an amazing character. She serves as a reminder that the deaf are still ordinary, imperfect people with their own issues and sensitivities just like the rest of us, and should be treated as such. Her mother is another great character, well developed with an unspoken sense of justification to her strict overprotectiveness. You can tell a lot about her character without necessarily being told it yourself. After everything that she's been through in raising Shoko, it is easy to respect the decisions she makes as a mother, even if these decisions seem cold or heartless. Ueno, Shoya's childhood friend, is a bad person. She constantly screams, insults, and talks down to everyone. She's self-centered and needlessly hates Shoko because of the burden she unwillingly places on other people. Shoya grows out of this hatred while Ueno simmers in it. She never ceases to be awful and never really gets her comeuppance. She isn't even a villain. The manga keeps trying to warm us up to her by comparing her actions to Shoya's, but the reason we side with Shoya is because he knows he was in the wrong and the guilt constantly haunts his life. Ueno doesn't regret a thing she did in elementary school, so regardless of how well-meaning she is, we can't bring ourselves to sympathise with this selfish bitchy teen. Miki has a similar problem. She loves being the centre of attention and hurts Shoya in the process, but we are still expected to sympathise with her at the end of the day. We can sympathise with characters like Mashiba on the other hand because he exists to expose and highlight Shoya's crippling guilt over what he did to Shoko. Mashiba can't stand bullies, and as he demonstrates his disgust for them, Shoya is reminded of everything he hates about his childhood self. In comparison, Mashiba is a far more successful character than Ueno or Miki, who we just can't bring ourselves to like. It's at this point that I want to talk about who I think is one of the most important characters in the entire manga, Tomohiro. This optimistic guy acts as the comic relief for a silent voice, bringing in some much needed wit and humour every now and again. Whenever Tomohiro steps into a room, you know he's going to find a way to lift the mood. Now, in a series that is all about handling big serious themes and confronting the core of what its characters hate about themselves, why do you think I'd say an optimist like Tomohiro is among the most significant? The answer is simple. Without him, the manga would be suffering from the seasonal depression. Take Scum's Wish for example. It is a series that does an amazing job of tackling the ugliness and despair of puberty and adolescent relationships. But the thing that gets me about Scum's Wish is how dreary it is, because there's no ray of light shining through all the darkness. Without something somewhere to lift your spirits, it's going to feel like you're sitting through despair porn. That's how I'd describe Scum's Wish, and although I wouldn't have gone that far with a silent voice, it certainly would have been gloomy without Tomohiro. He brightens things up without undermining the serious issues the manga deals with, just as important a role as the characters with the issues. A Silent Voice's artwork is solid. It possesses a sketchy, simplistic style that allows for a fluid tone. Facial expressions are both simple and full of subtle details, the saddest of faces sneaking into the corners of smiles. Things like eyelash lines, pupils and mouth lines aren't limited to realistic proportions, allowing for more freedom of expression without having to capture every specific detail, the same way mangaka like Inio Asano do. While Asano's hyper-realistic style does an amazing job of bringing painstaking detail to all of his characters through lifelike accuracy, A Silent Voice's simplicity means that we quickly memorise faces. Therefore, When we see something new in a face, it sticks out to us, emphasising whatever it depicts. A silent voice achieves a remarkably high level of expression using this method. It isn't just the drawings themselves that work in the manga's favour. The very act of turning the page is used to create suspense or surprise at key moments. It uses this need to turn the page as an opportunity to deliver some fierce emotional gut punches and brief cliffhangers. The artwork is also quite visually communicative, even for a manga. Dialogue comes second fiddle to visual storytelling, which is how any visual medium should be. The same rule of show don't tell that applies to film also applies to manga, and a silent voice knows this. I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about the way this manga incorporates sign language into its narrative. You would think it impossible considering sign language relies on movement of the hands to communicate, and even if not, I wouldn't deny you any initial skepticism over whether it might just be a silly gimmick that gets in the way. But a silent voice does it spectacularly well, using it only as often as it's required, and sometimes even as an element of a few narrative arcs. It doesn't even interrupt the natural flow of the story either, not always being repeated by Shoya for our benefit as Shoko's own bodily expressions often tell us all we need to know. We pick up and learn a few recurring signs too, an intentional effort by the manga to teach us a little in order to add to the story, instead of taking away from it. Yes, the artwork for a silent voice achieves a lot, from subtle expression born out of simplicity to the full incorporation of sign language in the flow of the plot. The first thing I feel like talking about here is the fact that you just can't fit 7 volumes worth of manga into 2 hours of film, so some stuff ultimately ends up getting cut or rewritten into new scenes. In the case of this film, Naoki Yamada cuts everything that isn't necessary. So goodbye filmmaking subplot, goodbye last several chapters of the manga. Instead of lingering, Miss Yamada decided to end the film at the moment when the story reached its greatest emotional catharsis. Some snippets of a blossoming romance are also removed, again to keep your attention on the film's central themes. Scenes rewritten entirely from the ground up are practically indistinguishable from adapted ones due to how closely the entire presentation captures the spirit of the source manga. Mashima does end up with no purpose in the story due to these cuts, which is one of the adaptation's most glaring flaws. Though even with the dregs of cut content showing through, the end result is a polished, refined version of the same core story. The shift to film alone is enough to amplify the intensity of the drama, and with Miss Yamada's directorial style packing meaning into every frame of cinema, it thankfully never passes the threshold of melodrama. I attended the Glasgow Film Festival's Q&A session with Miss Yamada herself, where she spoke about how every single flower she shows in the film means something to the story. Everything in the presentation is meticulous and deliberate, and the film gives you a ton to chew on as a result. This adaptation was animated by Kyoto Animation, who are also responsible for works like Clannad, Sound Euphonium, and also by Miss Yamada, K-On!, to name just a few. They and their style are known for evoking the beauty of life, which fits any big theme in the work that tackles it like a glove. Not only do they do an amazing job of translating the expressive nature of the artwork into a bright, fluid, and colourful form, but I don't think any other studio could have done a silent voice justice. Under Miss Yamada's direction, they really bring Yoshitoki Oima's characters to life, taking full advantage of audio and movement to communicate with the audience in ways that a manga just can't. The film opens with My Generation by The Who at the insistence of Miss Yamada, immediately establishing Shoya's free-flying attitude and the joy he finds in conquering boredom every day. It kicks ass and got a big grin out of me. From the original soundtrack, we get a range of extremely subtle, downplayed tracks, working in the film's favour. A soundtrack should never distract you from what is going on, but at the same time it is also just as important as your plot and your characters. So although there are a few tracks I can remember from 2 viewings, I can guarantee that its minimalist presence certainly did amplify a sense of emotion. And those tracks I can remember, like Lit for example, are played in isolation to elicit a particular mood. Finally, the film's theme song, Koi wa Shita no wa, is saved until the end credits play. It's a bit of a waste of a great song, but considering it's a lot more pronounced than the soundtrack itself, I can understand why Miss Yamada might reserve it for after the film is concluded. Coming out of the theatre, and as a big fan of the original manga, I felt extremely satisfied with this adaptation, and with a sincere veneration for Naoki Yamada's directorial talents too. So what can I say about A Silent Voice? It does so much more in the space of a single volume than your typical manga would. It deals well with more heavy themes at once than most mangakas would know what to do with. It portrays the deaf and the socially anxious with equal doses of truth to life. It is brought to life by an artist who has long since mastered subtlety, and applies it liberally. And to its name it has a remarkably faithful, well animated, and expertly directed film adaptation. But enough of its prowess as a piece of entertainment. This series speaks to me as a person person in ways that no other work of fiction ever has. It touches the very depths of the human heart, tugging and warming at will. Nothing else feels so complete in its exploration of people and how important communication is in bringing us closer together. A Silent Voice truly is a work of genuine art, something that deserves to be enjoyed and treasured by millions for generations to come. All 7 volumes of A Silent Voice are available in paperback from Kodansha Comics. They are also available digitally on Crunchyroll's premium service. As for the film, I've been fortunate enough to attend the international premiere in Edinburgh last October and the showing at this year's Glasgow Film Festival, but you'll have to wait for its official UK theatrical run on the 15th of March to see it for yourself. You can book your tickets at asilentvoice.co.uk. As of the time of this recording, no US screenings have been announced, but I'm sure it'll be on its way to the States soon. If you're looking for another emotionally charged drama, then I'd recommend Orange. It deals with many of the same themes that Silent Voice does, but supposedly received a lackluster anime adaptation, so you'll want to check out the source manga instead. And a blind recommendation, Welcome to the NHK. From what I've heard, it also deals with disability, but even if I'm wrong, I've heard only positive things about it, so you should have a good time with it either way. If you liked this video and want to see more, then remember to subscribe or follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, cheerio.